journey together through the whole of the old Egyptian world, slowly and gently, from the very first stirring of life upon the dark and silent waters to the quiet, sunlit fields where the blessed go to rest at last. This is a long and winding tale, far longer than a single night's rest, and you do not need to hold on to any of it. Let it move over you like the slow and patient river Nile, drifting endlessly toward the sea, and let your body grow heavier and your breathing slower with every passing word. There is nowhere you need to be tonight, and nothing you need to remember. And if you find some comfort in these long, quiet journeys, you are warmly welcome to follow along or to subscribe and to leave a gentle like before you drift away, so that these stories can keep finding the people who need them, night after night. There is no rush in it, and nothing is asked of you now but to rest. So settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let us begin at the very beginning, upon the still, dark waters, long before the sun had first risen over the world. In the beginning, the old Egyptians said, there was only none. A vast and boundless ocean of dark, still water, without surface, and without shore, formless and silent and endless, stretching in every direction through an eternal night. There was no earth, and no sky, and no sun, and no living thing. There was only this deep and patient water, resting quietly upon itself, holding within it, unseen, the slumbering seed of everything that would one day come to be. Imagine it for a moment, if you like, a gentle, endless dark, calm and complete, waiting without impatience for the very first light. And then, so slowly that no one could ever have marked the moment, upon the surface of those dark waters, a change began. From out of the endless ocean of none, the first land gently rose, a single small mound of earth, emerging quietly from the deep, the very first solid ground in all of existence. And upon that first mound, the first of the gods came into being, self-created, rising out of the waters of his own will. His name was Atum, which means the complete one, and he stood alone upon the little island of earth, the first light in the endless dark, gazing out over the silent waters that had made him. Atum was alone in the new world, and so, out of himself, he brought forth the first divine pair, the first children of creation. He breathed out his son Shu, who was the god of the air and of the wind, the empty space that holds the world apart. And he brought forth his daughter Tefnut, who was the goddess of moisture, of dew and of rain. And so, from the one, there came the two, and the world was no longer quite so empty, for now there was air to breathe, and moisture to soften it, and the first small family of gods stood together upon the mound, in the middle of the endless sea. Shu and Tefnut, the air and the moisture, in their turn had children of their own, and and these were two of the greatest powers of the Egyptian world. Their son was Geb, the god of the earth, broad and green and steady, upon whose broad back all living things would one day dwell. And their daughter was Nut, the goddess of the sky, vast and star-strewn, arching high overhead. Geb and Nut loved one another dearly, and at first they were pressed close together, the earth and the sky, with no room at all between them for anything to grow. And so their father, Shu, the god of the air, gently lifted Nut, the sky, high up above Geb, the earth, and held her there, arching over him like a great starry canopy stretched from horizon to horizon. And in the wide new space between the earth below and the sky above, there was room at last for the world to unfold, room for the air and the light, and every living thing that was still to come. If you look up on a clear night, the old Egyptians would say, the stars you see are the body of Nut, the sky goddess, arching gently and forever over the sleeping earth. Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, had children of their own, and with them the great family of the first gods, the Ennead, was complete. There were 4 of them, and their names run through all the tales that follow. There was Osiris, gentle and good, who would become a great and beloved king. There was Isis, wise and loving and powerful in magic, who would become his devoted queen. There was Set, restless and stormy, the god of the deserts and of chaos. And there was Nephthys, quiet and faithful, the keeper of the household and of the dead. 4 children of earth and sky, whose long story we shall follow gently through the night. There is a gentle tale about how those very gods came to be born. For it was said that Nut, the sky, was foretold to bear children who would be mighty, and Ra, in his caution, decreed that Nut should not be able to give birth on any day of the year. And the year, in those times, had only 360 days. And so poor Nut, longing for her children, turned to the wise god Thoth for help. And Thoth, ever clever and ever kind, devised a gentle solution to the difficulty. Thoth went to the moon god and challenged him to a game, and won from him a small portion of his light, just enough to make 5 whole new days, days that belonged to no month and to no ordinary reckoning of the year. And upon these 5 new days, which fell outside of Ra's decree, Nut was at last able to give birth to her children, one upon each day, Osiris and Horus the elder, and Set and Isis and Nephthys. And so the great gods were born, and the year gained its 5 special days besides, which the Egyptians ever after kept as festival days. And this was why the Egyptian year thereafter had 365 days, just as ours does, 360 ordinary days, and then 5 special days at the end, the birthdays of the great gods, added by the cleverness of Thoth and the light of the moon. It is the kind of tale the Egyptians loved, one that wove the great gods gently into the very shape of the calendar, so that the turning of their own year was, itself, a quiet remembrance of the birth of the gods. But before we come to their tale, we must speak of the sun. For above all the gods of Egypt there shone the great sun god, Ra. In some tellings, he was one with Atum, the first god, the same power seen at different hours. In others, he rose newly each day. He was the giver of all light and all life, the blazing disk that crossed the heavens, and it was said that all the world had come from him, and that every living thing owed its warmth and its very breath to his shining. Of all the many gods of Egypt, none was greater or more honored than Ra, the Lord of the Sun. Each and every day, the old Egyptians said, Ra made a great journey across the sky, sailing in a splendid golden boat, the boat of millions of years. At dawn, he rose in the east, young and bright, and full of morning strength. Through the long hours of the day, he sailed slowly westward across the blue expanse of the sky goddess Nut, growing to his full and blazing power at noon, and then softening, hour by hour, toward the evening. And at dusk, he came at last to the western horizon, old and weary now, and sank slowly down out of the world of the living, to begin a far stranger journey through the night. For the Egyptians believed that when the sun set in the west, it did not simply vanish, but passed into another world entirely, the Duat, the shadowed realm of the night and of the dead, which lay hidden beneath the earth. And each night, Ra sailed his golden boat through this dark and secret underworld, through its 12 hours and its 12 gates, so that he might be reborn again, fresh and young, in the east at dawn. It was a perilous voyage, and a wondrous one, and it is worth our while to sail through it, slowly and safely, tonight. As the sunboat of Ra passed the western horizon and entered the first hour of the night, the god was old and tired, his light grown dim. But he was not alone. A great crew of gods sailed with him upon the boat, gods to steer, and gods to guard, and gods to work the great magic that would carry him safely through the dark. And all through the underworld, in the deep gloom, the spirits of the blessed dead waited quietly for his coming. For when the light of Ra's boat passed by them, even for a single hour, they woke and were warmed and rejoiced before the darkness closed over them again. Hour by hour, gate by gate, the golden boat sailed deeper into the Duat, through strange and shadowed regions, each one guarded by gods and spirits whose secret names had to be known before the gate would open. Through caverns and rivers of the underworld, the boat drifted on, its light glowing softly in the dark, bringing a brief warmth and a brief waking to the sleeping dead who lined its banks. It was a slow and solemn voyage, quiet and unhurried, through the deep and patient dark, ever onward toward the distant dawn. But there was a great danger waiting in the depths of the night. For in the darkest hour of the Duat, there dwelt a monstrous serpent named Apophis, the great enemy of the sun, a creature of pure chaos, who wished for nothing more than to swallow the light of Ra and plunge all the world into endless darkness. Each and every night, as the sunboat passed through his domain, Apophis rose up to bar its way, coiling across the dark river, vast and terrible, seeking to stop the sun from ever rising again. And so each night, a great and quiet battle was fought in the depths of the underworld. The gods who sailed with Ra rose up to defend him, chief among them the strong god Set, who for all his stormy nature stood at the prow of the boat and drove back the great serpent, and the magic of the other gods bound and turned him aside. Night after night, Apophis was defeated, though never destroyed forever, and the sunboat sailed safely on. And so the Egyptians understood the eternal turning of things. That light must be defended anew each night, and that the dawn, though certain, is never simply given, but gently won. And at last, having passed through all the 12 hours of the night, and all its gates, and all its dangers, the boat of Ra came to the eastern horizon once more. And there, in the last hour before dawn, a great wonder took place. The old and weary sun god was reborn, made young and bright and new again, rising up refreshed to begin another day. And so he climbed once more into the morning sky, and his light spilled out golden over the waking world, and all of Egypt lifted up its face to greet him. And this, the old people said, is why the sun rises faithfully each morning, forever. Because each night, in the hidden dark, it is patiently born again. There is a curious and gentle old tale about Ra, from the days when he had grown very old. For even the sun god, the Egyptians said, aged slowly with the long turning of the ages. His bones had turned to silver, his flesh to gold, and his hair to true lapis lazuli. And though he was still mighty, he was no longer as sharp as he had once been. And in those days there lived the goddess Isis, wise and clever and ambitious, who wished to share in the deepest of Ra's power, and she devised a subtle and patient plan to win it. the true source of Ra's power, it was said, lay hidden in his secret name, a name he had never told to anyone, and which he kept locked deep within himself. Whoever knew that secret name would hold a share of his very power. And so Isis, watching the old sun god as he walked, gathered up a little of the spittle that fell from his aged mouth and mixed it with the earth, and from it she shaped a small and cunning serpent and laid it hidden upon the path where Ra walked each day. And when Ra passed by, the little serpent bit him, and a pain unlike any he had ever known ran through the old god, for it was made partly from his own being, and so it could harm even him. He cried out and called all the gods to help him, but none of them could ease his suffering, for none of them understood it. And then Isis came to him, gentle and concerned, and offered to heal him with her powerful magic. But only, she said softly, if he would tell her his true and secret name, so that her magic might have power to work. For a long while Ra resisted and tried to satisfy her with all his other names, the many titles by which the world knew him. But the pain grew and grew until at last, weary and suffering, the old sun god relented and allowed his secret name to pass quietly from his own heart into the heart of Isis. And at once she healed him, and the pain was gone. And from that day, Isis held a share of the deepest magic in all the world, which she would one day need for the greatest task of her life. It is a tale the Egyptians felt about the quiet power of patience and cleverness, even over the mightiest of all. Let us turn now to the gentlest and most beloved of all the Egyptian tales, the long story of Osiris and Isis, the god-king and his devoted queen. In the earliest days, it was said, after the gods had made the world, Osiris ruled over Egypt as its first great king, and Isis ruled beside him as his queen. And it was a golden age, for Osiris was wise and good, and he taught the people everything they needed to live well: how to farm the land and grow their grain, how to make bread and wine, how to worship the gods, and how to live together in peace and in justice. Under the gentle rule of Osiris, the old story said, Egypt flourished as never before or since. The people, who had once lived roughly and wildly, learned the arts of civilization, and the land grew green and prosperous along the banks of the life-giving Nile. So beloved was Osiris that he set out to share these gifts with the whole world, traveling far and wide, teaching all peoples the arts of peace, while his faithful Queen Isis ruled wisely in his place at home. It was a time of great happiness, remembered ever after with longing. But such happiness, in the old tales, rarely lasts undisturbed. For Osiris had a brother, and his name was Set, the god of the desert and the storm, of chaos and of the barren places. And Set watched his brother's happiness and his glory with a growing and bitter jealousy, until at last that jealousy hardened into a cold and secret plan. He longed for the throne of Egypt for himself, and he could not bear to see his gentle brother so loved. And so, quietly, patiently, hiding his true heart behind a smiling face, Set began to prepare a trap for the good king Osiris. When Osiris returned at last from his long travels, Set held a great feast in his honor, and all the gods were invited. And at the height of the celebration, Set brought out a beautiful chest, made of cedar and ebony and gold, wondrously decorated, and he announced, as though in play, that he would give this chest to whoever could lie down inside it and fit it perfectly. One by one, the guests climbed in and tried, but the chest fit none of them, for Set had made it in secret to the exact measure of Osiris alone. And at last, all unsuspecting, the good king Osiris himself lay down within the beautiful chest, and it fit him perfectly, as though it had been made for him, which indeed it had. And in that moment, Set and his followers rushed forward and slammed the lid shut, and sealed it fast with molten lead, so that Osiris was trapped within. And then they carried the chest to the river Nile and cast it out upon the waters, and the current bore it away out of the land of Egypt and down toward the sea, carrying the gentle king away from all who loved him. When Isis learned of what had befallen her beloved husband, her grief was very deep, and yet she did not despair. Instead, filled with love and with a fierce and patient resolve, she cut her hair and put on the clothes of mourning, and set out to search the whole world over for the chest that held her husband, so that she might bring him home and give him the proper rites. And so began one of the great journeys of all the old stories, the long and patient wandering of Isis, searching every shaw and every reed bed, never once giving up her hope. Far away, the old tale said, the chest had come to rest at last upon a distant shaw, where a great tree grew up around it, enclosing it within its trunk. And that tree grew so beautiful and so strong that a king of that land had it cut down to be a pillar in his palace, never knowing what it held. And Isis, guided by her love and her magic, at last came to that far country and found the pillar, and gently freed the chest from within the tree and reclaimed the body of her beloved Osiris, and brought it home at last to the land of Egypt. But even then, her trials were not over. For while Isis hid the chest in the marshes and went to prepare the rites, Set came hunting by night in the reeds, and found it, and in his fury he tore the body of Osiris into many pieces, and scattered them the length and breadth of Egypt, so that his brother might never be made whole. And so poor Isis had to begin her long search all over again, wandering the whole land a second time, this time gathering up the scattered pieces of her husband, one by patient one. With the help of her faithful sister Nephthys and of the jackal-headed god Anubis, who knew the secret arts, Isis gathered together all the scattered pieces of Osiris and bound them gently with linen wrappings, and so made the very first mummy whole and at peace. And then, working the deepest and most powerful of all her magic, the very secret magic she had won long ago from Ra himself, Isis breathed life back into her husband, just long enough, just once more, and for one last time, the gentle Osiris opened his eyes. But Osiris could not remain among the living, for he had passed through death, and death, once entered, changes everything. And so, rather than return to rule the land of the living, the gentle Osiris went down instead to rule the kingdom of the dead, the beautiful fields of the afterlife, where he would reign forever as the kind and just lord of that quiet realm, welcoming the blessed dead into their rest. And so death itself, through Osiris, was given a gentle and a hopeful face, not an ending, but a doorway into a peaceful and everlasting land. But the story of that royal family was not yet finished, for in the brief moment that Isis had restored her husband to life, she had conceived a son, and knowing that Set would seek to destroy any heir of Osiris, Isis fled into the vast marshes of the Nile Delta, and there, hidden among the tall papyrus reeds, she gave birth to her child in secret and named him Horus. And there, in the green and watery quiet of the marshes, far from the eyes of the jealous Set, she raised her son alone, keeping him safe and hidden until he should grow strong enough to claim his father's throne. Those were anxious years for Isis, hiding her small son in the reeds, for the marshes held many dangers, serpents and scorpions and crocodiles lurking in the dark water. More than once, the old tales say, the child Horus fell ill or was stung, and Isis, frantic with worry, worked her powerful healing magic to save him, or called upon the other gods for aid. And so Horus grew, slowly and secretly, season by season, in the hidden green world of the marshes, a boy nursing a quiet purpose, one day to grow up, and to set right the great wrong that had been done to his gentle father. And at last, when Horus was fully grown, strong and bright as a young falcon, he came forth from the marshes to claim the throne of Egypt that was his by right, and to challenge his uncle Set, who had ruled unjustly in his place for so long. And so began the long contest between Horus and Set, nephew and uncle, order against chaos, a struggle that would go on, the old story said, for 80 long years, and that was fought not only with strength, but with cleverness and cunning, and endless argument before the assembled gods. The gods themselves gathered to judge the great dispute, to decide who should rightly rule. Set, who was strong and mighty, or Horus, the young and rightful heir. And the contest between the two took many strange forms over the long years. There were fierce battles, in which each was wounded and each healed again. There were contests of cleverness and of trickery, in which first one and then the other seemed to gain the upper hand. And through it all, the wise gods weighed and argued and debated, seeking the just and proper outcome. In one famous trial, the two rivals raced against each other in boats made, they agreed, of stone. But clever Horus built his boat of wood and merely painted it to look like stone, while Set, taking the challenge at its word, carved his boat from a real mountain peak, so that when it was set upon the water, it sank at once. Again and again, through such contests, the young Horus showed that cleverness and rightful purpose could overcome even the raw strength of Set. And slowly the judgment of the gods began to turn in his favor. At last, after all the long years of struggle, the assembled gods gave their final judgment. They declared that Horus was the rightful king of Egypt, the true heir of his father Osiris, and they set the crown upon his head. And Set, the god of the desert and the storm, was given his own place in the order of things, to dwell in the wild and barren lands, and in some tellings, to sail upon the boat of Ra, and to fight the great serpent Apophis each night, so that even his stormy strength might serve the light. And so, at last, order was restored, and balance was made whole again. And so the great pattern of Egyptian kingship was set in the very beginning, in the world of the gods. Osiris ruled forever as the gentle lord of the dead in the peaceful fields of the afterlife. Horus ruled as the living king upon the earth, and every pharaoh who ever sat upon the throne of Egypt after them was believed to be the living Horus while he reigned, and to become one with Osiris when at last he died. And so the king was a bridge between the gods and the people, and between the living and the dead, forever. Now around this great royal family there moved a whole host of other gods and goddesses, each with their own place and their own gentle power in the ordering of the world. And we shall meet a few of them now, softly, one by one. For the Egyptian world was full of the divine. There were gods of the sun and the moon, of writing and of wisdom, of love and of war, of the river and the harvest, of birth and of death, each one a familiar and comforting presence in the daily life of the people. First among them was Thoth, the god of wisdom, of writing, and of the moon, most often shown with the head of a graceful ibis bird, or sometimes as a wise baboon. It was Thoth, the Egyptians said, who had invented writing itself, the sacred hieroglyphs, and who kept the records of all things, and who measured out the passing of time. He was the scribe of the gods, calm and learned and just, and he appeared again and again in the old tales as a wise counselor and a fair judge, the keeper of all knowledge, and the patient recorder of every deed. There was Anubis, the god of embalming and of the dead, shown with the black head of a jackal, for jackals were seen prowling the edges of the desert cemeteries. But Anubis was not a frightening god. He was a careful and protective one. It was he who watched over the sacred work of mummification, who guarded the tombs and the resting places of the dead, and who guided the souls of the departed safely into the afterlife, taking them gently by the hand and leading them to their judgment. He was the quiet guardian at the threshold between the living and the dead. There was Hathor, one of the most beloved of all the goddesses, the goddess of love, of joy, of music, of dance, and of motherhood, often shown as a gentle cow, or as a beautiful woman crowned with cow's horns and the golden disk of the sun. Where Hathor was, there was happiness and celebration and the warmth of love. She was a nurturing and a joyful presence, the goddess who welcomed the newborn into the world and comforted the dead in the next, associated with everything that makes life sweet and worth the living. And yet even gentle Hathor had another, fiercer aspect. And this brings us to one of the most striking of the old tales, the story of the time that Ra grew angry with humankind. For in the days when Ra still ruled upon the earth, the people had grown disrespectful and rebellious, and the old sun god, weary and offended, resolved to punish them. And so he sent forth the fierce eye of the sun, in the form of the lioness goddess Sekhmet, a being of terrible power and burning rage, to bring his justice down upon the world. And Sekhmet fell upon the world with a terrible fury, so fierce in her wrath that it seemed she might destroy the whole of humankind entirely. But Ra, watching, was moved to pity, for he did not truly wish to see all people destroyed, and so he devised a gentle trick to save them. He had a great quantity of beer brewed and dyed a deep red, the color of blood, and had it poured out across the fields where Sekhmet would pass. and the fierce goddess, thinking it was blood, drank deeply of it, and grew calm and sleepy and gentle once more, and so humankind was spared. And Sekhmet, soothed, became Hathor again, the goddess of joy. There was Ptah, the great creator god of the ancient city of Memphis. A calm and dignified god shone wrapped like a mummy, holding a staff. In the teachings of his city, it was Ptah who had created the whole world, not with his hands, but with his heart and his tongue, by first conceiving each thing in his thought, and then speaking its name aloud, so that it came into being. He was the patron of craftsmen and builders and sculptors, the divine artisan, the one who gave shape and form to the world through the quiet power of thought and of the spoken word. There was Khnum, a gentle god with the head of a ram, who was said to shape each living thing upon his potter's wheel. Down in the depths, where the waters of the Nile were thought to rise, Khnum sat at his wheel, and from the soft river clay he lovingly molded the bodies of all living creatures, and of every child before its birth, shaping each one with care, and then placing it into the world. It is a tender image the old people felt, that each of us was once shaped gently by a patient God, spun into being upon a quiet wheel beside the eternal river. There was Ma'at, perhaps the most important of all, though she was less a god than a great and gentle principle, the goddess of truth, of justice, of balance, and of the right order of all things. She was shown as a woman wearing a single tall feather, the feather of truth, upon her head. Ma'at was the harmony that held the whole world together, the balance between the earth and the sky, the fairness between one person and another, the order that kept chaos at bay. To live well, the Egyptians believed, was simply to live in accordance with Ma'at, with truth and balance, and a good and gentle heart. There were so many more, moving quietly through the Egyptian world. There was Bastet, the gentle cat goddess, protector of the home and of children, and Sobek, the crocodile god of the river and its strength, and Nephthys, the quiet sister of Isis, keeper of the household and companion of the grieving, and Nut and Jeb, the sky and the earth we have already met, and Khonsu, a god of the moon, and many others besides. Together, they made up the great and familiar family of the Egyptian gods, a divine presence, woven through every hour of every day. There was, too, a wondrous bird called the Bennu, which the Egyptians imagined as a great heron, shining and beautiful, and which was closely tied to the sun, and to Ra, and to the very idea of renewal and rebirth. The Bennu, it was said, was reborn again and again out of fire, rising renewed from the ashes of what had come before, and it was thought to have been present at the very first dawn of creation, alighting upon that first mound of earth that rose from the waters of none. It became, in later ages far beyond Egypt, the model for the tale of the phoenix, the bird that rises forever anew. And over all of this, holding the whole world in its rhythm, there flowed the great river Nile, the very lifeblood of Egypt. Each year, with a faithfulness the Egyptians treasured, the river would rise and flood its banks, spreading rich dark soil across the fields, and then draw back again, leaving the land green and fertile and ready for the planting. This yearly flooding, the inundation, was the very heartbeat of the land, and it was seen as a divine gift tied to the tears of Isis weeping for Osiris, and to the eternal cycle of death and rebirth that ran through the whole of the Egyptian world. Now let us turn, gently and without any fear, to the part of the Egyptian world that they thought about most deeply of all, the journey of the soul after death, and the peaceful land that waited beyond. For no people in all of history, perhaps, prepared for death with such quiet care and such deep hope as the ancient Egyptians. They did not see death as a dark ending, but as a passage, a journey difficult but survivable from this life into another, everlasting one in the beautiful fields, ruled over by the gentle Osiris. The Egyptians believed that each person was made up of several parts. There was the body, of course, and there was the name and the shadow. But there were two parts especially important to the soul's survival. There was the ka, the life force, the vital spark that was born with each person and lived on after death, and which needed to be sustained. And there was the ba, often shown as a bird with a human head, the unique personality of a person which could move freely between the tomb and the world beyond. For the soul to live forever, these parts had to be kept safe and whole. And this is why the Egyptians took such great care to preserve the body after death, through the sacred art of mummification, watched over by the jackal god Anubis. For they believed that the ba and the ka needed a preserved body to return to, a home to rest in through eternity. And so the body was carefully prepared over many days, with great skill and reverence, wrapped in fine linen, adorned with protective amulets, and laid to rest. It was not a grim task to them, but a sacred and a hopeful one, the careful preparing of a traveler for the longest of all journeys. Body was laid to rest in a tomb, and with it were placed all the things the soul might need for its journey and its eternal life: food and drink, clothing and jewels, furniture and tools, and small figures who who would do any needed work in the next world. And upon the walls, and upon papyrus scrolls placed within, were written the sacred spells and guiding words that would help the soul find its way. The collection of texts we now call the Book of the Dead, which was, in truth, a gentle guidebook for the traveler, a map and a companion for the journey through the night. For the soul's journey, the Egyptians believed, was much like the nightly journey of Ra himself, a passage through the Duat, the shadowed underworld, with its many gates and its many dangers. The soul would travel through this dark realm, guided by the spells it had learned, calling each gate and each guardian by its secret name so that the way would open. It was a long and solemn passage through the dark, but the soul did not go unprepared, and it did not go alone, for Anubis walked beside it, and the words of the Book of the Dead lit the way like a lamp. And at the end of that long dark journey, the soul came at last to the most important moment of all, the great judgment in the Hall of Two Truths, the Hall of Ma'at. Here the soul was led into a vast and solemn chamber where sat Osiris himself, the gentle lord of the dead, upon his throne, and around him the great gods of judgment, 42 of them, each one a witness. And in the center of the hall stood a great golden balance, a set of scales upon which the most important weighing in all the world was about to take place. For here, in the Hall of Two Truths, the heart of the dead person was to be weighed. The Egyptians believed that the heart, not the mind, was the seat of a person's character, the record of everything they had done and been in life, all their kindness and all their cruelty, all their honesty and all their deceit. And so the heart was placed gently upon one pan of the great scale, and upon the other pan was placed a single thing, the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth, and of balance, and of the right order of all things. And the great question was this: would the heart balance against the feather? For if a person had lived a good and honest life in harmony with Ma'at, with a heart untroubled by great wrongs, then their heart would be light as the feather itself, and the scales would balance perfectly. Anubis carefully watched the balance, and wise Thoth stood ready with his palette to record the result. It was a moment of great solemnity and great hope, the whole of a life weighed gently in the balance against a single feather. Before the weighing, the soul would speak what is called the negative confession, declaring all the wrongs it had not done. I have not stolen, the soul would say. I have not lied. I have not caused anyone to weep. I have not done violence to any person. I have not stolen the bread of the hungry. It was a gentle accounting of a life lived well, a quiet declaration of a good and honest heart. And as the soul spoke, the scales would settle, and the truth of the heart would be revealed. Now, waiting beside the scales, there crouched a curious creature called Ammit, part crocodile, part lion, and part hippopotamus, known as the Devourer. If a heart proved heavy with wrongdoing, weighed down by a life of cruelty and deceit, so that it sank the scale against the feather, then that heart would be given to Ammit, and the soul would find no place in the eternal fields. And yet the Egyptians did not dwell on this fear overmuch, for they trusted in their spells and in the mercy of the gods, and above all in the hope that a gently lived life would weigh true. And for the soul whose heart balanced true against the feather of Ma'at, light and honest and good, there came the sweetest reward of all. Thoth would record the happy judgment, and the soul would be led forward and presented to Osiris, and welcomed at last into the eternal afterlife. They called this blessed one the true of voice, the justified, for their life had been weighed and found good. And the long journey through the dark was over, and only peace and light remained ahead. And what awaited the justified soul was a place called the Field of Reeds, the Aru, the beautiful paradise of the Egyptian afterlife. And it was imagined not as some strange or distant heaven, but as a perfect and idealized version of Egypt itself, a peaceful land of green fields and flowing waters, of tall reeds swaying in a gentle breeze, where the grain grew high and the harvests never failed, and where the blessed dead lived on forever in quiet contentment, reunited with those they had loved, under the warm and eternal light of Ra. In the Field of Reeds, the old Egyptians believed the soul would live a life much like the best of its life on earth, but without any of its sorrows, farming its own rich fields, resting beneath the shade of sweet-fruited trees, sailing upon calm blue waters, and dwelling in peace beside family and friends forever. It was a vision of eternity, as a kind of endless golden afternoon in a beloved and familiar land, not an escape from the world, but the world itself, made perfect and made to last forever. It is a gentle and a comforting thought to rest upon tonight. And so, for the ancient Egyptians, the whole of existence was held within a great and hopeful circle. The sun died each evening in the west and was reborn each morning in the east. The river rose and fell and rose again, bringing life to the land year after year. And the human soul, too, passed through the darkness of death, only to be reborn into an eternal and peaceful morning. Death was not the enemy of life, but a part of its great and gentle turning, as natural and as certain as the setting and the rising of the sun. the Egyptians told many other tales as well, beyond the great stories of the gods, and we shall wander gently through a few of them now, as the night deepens. There was, for instance, the tale of the Eye of Ra and of the distant goddess. For it was said that once the fiery daughter of Ra, his very eye, in the form of a fierce lioness goddess, grew angry and left Egypt entirely, wandering far away into the deserts of the distant south, and would not return. And without her, something was missing from the world, and Ra longed for her to come home. And so Ra sent wise Thoth, the god of wisdom, to bring her back. And Thoth, knowing he could not force the fierce goddess, went to her instead as a gentle and clever companion, and soothed her anger not with strength, but with soft words and with stories. Tale by tale, as they traveled, he calmed her rage and eased her homesickness, until at last her fury melted away into gentleness, and she agreed to return. And as she came home to Egypt, her fierce heat softened into warmth and joy, and she was welcomed back with music and dancing and great rejoicing. It is a tale, the Egyptians felt, about how gentleness and patience can soothe even the fiercest of hearts. There was the gentle tale of the Shipwrecked Sailor, one of the oldest stories in all the world. A sailor, a lone survivor of a great storm at sea, was cast ashore upon a mysterious and beautiful island, rich with every kind of fruit and fish and fowl. And there he met the lord of that island, a vast and magnificent serpent, golden and wise, who did not harm him, but instead spoke to him kindly and comforted him, and told him his own tale of loss, and promised him that he would be rescued and returned home safely in due time. And so it came to pass, just as the great serpent had promised. In time, a ship appeared upon the horizon, and the sailor was carried safely home again, laden with the gifts the kind serpent had given him. It is a quiet and a hopeful little tale of kindness found in a strange place, and of a safe return home against all hope, and the Egyptians told it, perhaps, for much the same reason we might tell such a story tonight, for the gentle comfort of it and the reassurance that even after the storm there is a shore and a kindness and a way home. There was a longer tale too, the tale of the two brothers named Anpu and Bata, who lived and worked together on a farm, the elder brother and the younger. It is a long and winding story, full of misunderstandings and magic and transformations, in which the good younger brother Bata is wronged and must flee, and undergoes many strange changes of form, becoming at last, through many turnings of fortune, a great one himself. It is one of the oldest folk tales ever written down, and like so many such tales, it turns in the end upon the triumph of innocence, and the setting right of an old wrong. The Egyptians loved such tales of magic and of transformation, of wise magicians who could read the secret books of Thoth and part the waters of a lake and work great wonders. They told of the magician Jedi, who could seemingly restore a severed head, and of priests who could fold back the waters to recover a lost jewel, and of the god Thoth's own book of magic, hidden and guarded, which held the secret spells of all creation. For the Egyptians, the world was a place woven through with hidden power and quiet magic, if only one knew the proper words. And their world was full, too, of sacred symbols and protective charms, each one carrying a gentle meaning. There was the Ankh, the looped cross, the very symbol of life itself, carried in the hands of the gods. There was the scarab beetle, which rolled its little ball of earth as Ra rolled the sun across the sky, and so became a symbol of rebirth and of the rising sun. There was the Eye of Horus, the Wadjet, a symbol of protection and of healing and of wholeness, painted upon amulets and ships and tombs to guard against all harm. These symbols were painted and carved and worn everywhere, for the Egyptians felt themselves gently surrounded and protected by the divine at every moment. An amulet of the scarab might be placed over the heart of the dead to help it in the weighing. The Ankh promised life everlasting. The Eye of Horus watched over the living and the dead alike. And in these small and beautiful things, the great truths of their world were held close and carried gently through every day, life and protection and the sure promise of rebirth. And there were the 4 sons of Horus, gentle guardians of the dead, who watched over the body in the tomb. Each of the 4 protected one of the vital organs, kept safe in special jars, and each was guarded in turn by one of the great protective goddesses, Isis and Nephthys among them. It was all part of the same careful, hopeful preparation. Nothing left to chance, everything watched over. The traveler sent on the long journey wrapped in layer upon layer of gentle protection and of love, for the Egyptians did not fear to prepare for death. They prepared for it, as one prepares a beloved guest for a long and certain journey home. The gods of Egypt were honored in great temples, which were thought of not as gathering places for the people, but as the actual houses of the gods upon the earth. Deep within each temple, in a dark and quiet inner sanctuary, there stood a statue of the god, and it was believed that something of the god's own spirit dwelt within it. And there, hidden from all but a few, the sacred daily rituals were performed, in quiet and in reverence, to care for the god as one would care for a living and honored presence. Each morning, the old accounts tell us, the high priest would enter the sanctuary and gently wake the god. The statue would be washed and dressed in fresh linen, and anointed with sweet oils, and adorned with jewels, and offered food and drink and incense. Hymns would be softly sung, and then, at the day's end, the god would be settled again for the night. It was a quiet, tender, daily rhythm of care, repeated in every temple across the land, day after day, year after year, for thousands of years, the patient tending of the divine. And above all the priests and the people stood the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, who was himself a sacred figure, a bridge between the gods and humankind. As we have heard, the living king was seen as the earthly embodiment of Horus, and the son of Ra, the sun god. It was the sacred duty of the Pharaoh to maintain Ma'at, the divine order and balance of the world, to keep the land just and prosperous and in harmony with the gods, so that the sun would rise and the river would flood and all would be well. And it was for the pharaohs, above all, that the greatest of the Egyptian monuments were raised, the vast and enduring pyramids, rising from the desert sands. These great structures were tombs, built to protect the body of the king, and to help his soul ascend to join the gods and the eternal stars. Their very shape, some believed, echoed that first mound of creation that rose from the waters of none, or the slanting rays of the sun reaching down to earth. They were, in a sense, great machines of resurrection, built of stone to last forever, monuments to the Egyptian hope of eternal life. And near the pyramids there crouched the great Sphinx, a vast figure with the body of a lion and the face of a king, gazing eternally toward the rising sun in the east, a silent guardian keeping its watch across the ages. And far to the south rose the great temple complexes, with their forests of massive columns, their walls covered in painted scenes and sacred writing, their tall obelisks reaching toward the heavens. The Egyptians built in stone and built to last, for they were a people always with one eye upon eternity, always building bridges between this brief life and the everlasting one. There were, in the long ages of Egypt, other great gods who rose to prominence as well. There was Amun, whose name meant the Hidden One, a mysterious god of the air and of the unseen, who in time was joined together with Ra to become Amun-Ra, the great king of the gods, worshipped above all others in the mighty temples of Thebes. He was the hidden power behind all things, present everywhere yet seen nowhere, the breath within the world. There was, for one remarkable age, the Atum, the very disk of the sun itself, worshipped for time as the single great god above all others, whose life-giving rays reached down to touch and bless the whole of creation. And there were countless smaller, homelier gods, close and dear to ordinary people in their daily lives. There was Bes, a cheerful, dwarfish household god who protected families and drove away evil with his laughter. And there was Taweret, a gentle hippopotamus goddess who watched over mothers and their newborn children. For every corner of life, there was a friendly and protecting presence. The Egyptians were great watchers of the sky as well, and they read the turning of the heavens with care. They saw the goddess Nut arching over the world each night, her body strewn with stars, and they told that each evening she swallowed the sun, which passed through her body in the night to be born again from her at dawn. They divided the night sky into groups of stars called the decans, which rose in their slow procession through the year, and by which they measured the hours of the night and the passing of the seasons. Most important of all the stars to them was the brilliant Septet, which we call Sirius, the brightest star in all the sky, for its yearly return to the dawn sky after a long absence came at just the time when the Nile began its life-giving flood. And so the rising of that bright star became the herald of the inundation and the marker of the Egyptian New Year, and a sign of renewal and of hope. The Egyptians, watching the same patient stars that wheel over you now, wove them gently into the great rhythm of their world. The Egyptians even imagined two different kinds of eternity, two ways that time could last forever. There was one kind, which was the eternity of endless repetition, the sun rising each day, the river flooding each year, the great cycles turning on and on without end. And there was another kind, which was the eternity of unchanging permanence, the stillness of the stone monument, the changeless peace of the blessed dead. And between these two, the turning and the still, the whole of the Egyptian world was gently held. And so, when we look back upon the world of the old Egyptians, we find a people who lived, above all, in hope. They looked upon the great cycles of their world, the daily death and rebirth of the sun, the yearly death and rebirth of the land, and they drew from them a deep and quiet confidence. That death was not an ending, but a turning, that the darkness always gives way in time to a new dawn, and that a good and gentle life, lived in harmony with the truth, would be rewarded with a peaceful eternity in the beautiful fields beyond. The Egyptians even imagined the sun itself in 3 gentle forms, according to the hour of the day. At dawn, the rising sun was Khepri, shown as a scarab beetle, the young sun pushing itself up over the horizon just as the little beetle rolls its ball of earth. At noon, in its full and blazing strength, it was Ra, the great sun god in his glory. And at evening, the setting sun was Atum, the old and complete one, sinking wearily toward his rest. Morning, noon, and evening, three faces of the one great light, turning gently through the day. There is a tender tale of Isis from the days when she wandered, hiding her infant son Horus from the wrath of Set. It was said that she traveled with 7 scorpions as her companions and her guardians, who went before her and watched over her upon the road. One night, a wealthy woman turned Isis away from her door in fear, but a poor fisherwoman took the goddess in. And the scorpions, angered at the rich woman's unkindness, crept into her house in the night, and her child was stung. The wealthy woman ran through the town, weeping, seeking help for her dying child. And Isis, though she had been turned away, could not bear to let an innocent child suffer for its mother's fault. And so she went to the house and laid her hands upon the child and spoke her powerful words of healing magic, naming each of the 7 scorpions and commanding their poison to depart. And the child was healed and lived. It is a tale the Egyptians felt about mercy given even to those who have wronged us, and about the deep and gentle power of a healing word. For the Egyptians believed deeply in the power of words and of names, a sacred power they called Heka, which we might call magic, but which was to them simply another farce woven into the fabric of the world. To know the true name of a thing was to have a share of power over it, as Isis had learned with the secret name of Ra. Words spoken with intent and written down and repeated could heal the sick and protect the traveler and guide the soul through the underworld. The world to them was a place that could be gently shaped by the right and careful word. And this is why writing itself was so sacred to them, the gift of Thoth, the god of wisdom. The hieroglyphs were not to them mere marks upon a wall. They were living things, holding real power. To write a person's name was to help preserve their soul. To erase it was a grave harm. And so they carved the names of their kings and their gods deep into eternal stone, and wrote the spells of protection upon their tombs, trusting that the written word would endure and would keep its gentle power long after the hand that wrote it had passed away. Wise Thoth, who gave them writing, was also the god of the moon and of the measuring of time. He measured out the days and the months and the years, and it was he who kept the great records and who stood by the scales at the weighing of the heart to record the judgment fairly. The waxing and waning of the moon was his, and by it the Egyptians reckoned many of their festivals. He was the calm and patient keeper of order and of knowledge, the one who wrote things down so that they would not be lost, the gentle librarian of the gods. The Duat, the underworld through which the sun and the souls of the dead traveled, was imagined as a vast and varied land with many regions. There were dark caverns and winding rivers. There were gates guarded by fearsome beings whose names had to be known. There were fields of fire that the wicked feared, and beautiful fertile fields where the blessed dwelt. It was a strange and shadowed mirror of the living world, through which the sunboat sailed each night, bringing its brief warmth and light to each region in turn, before passing on toward the dawn. And through all its dangers, the blessed soul was guided safely, for it carried the sacred spells, and it was watched over by the gods. The Egyptians did not imagine the afterlife as a place of dread for the good, but as a place to be navigated with care and then enjoyed in peace. Every fearsome guardian could be passed with the proper word. Every gate could be opened with the proper name, and beyond them all lay the quiet green fields of rest. It was a journey, yes, but a journey with a sure and gentle destination for those who had lived in truth. Let us think, too, of the great festivals, for the Egyptian world was not only solemn, but full of joy and celebration. There was the great Opet festival, when the statue of the god Amun was carried in a grand and joyful procession from one temple to another, and the whole city rejoiced. There was the beautiful feast of the valley, when families would cross the river to visit the tombs of their loved ones and share a meal there together among the living and the remembered dead. These were times of music and feasting and gladness and the renewing of the bonds of love. For the goddess Hathor especially, there were festivals of music and dance and joy, for she was the lady of celebration, and also, gently, the lady of the west, who welcomed the setting sun and the arriving dead into the peaceful land beyond. The Egyptians loved music and filled their celebrations with the sounds of the harp and the flute and the rattle called the sistrum, which was sacred to Hathor. Theirs was a world that valued gladness and beauty and the sweet pleasures of life, alongside all their careful preparation for the life to come. And we must not forget the great and enduring wonders they built. In the age we call the Old Kingdom, the pharaohs raised the mighty pyramids at Giza, the greatest of which stood as the tallest structure made by human hands for thousands of years afterward. Within the oldest of the royal tombs were carved the pyramid texts, the most ancient religious writings in the world, spells to help the king's soul ascend to the heavens and join the eternal circling stars, which never set and so never die. Later ages raised other wonders. The vast temple of Karnak, with its great hall of towering stone columns, so large and so many that a whole crowd could stand upon the top of a single one. The beautiful temples carved directly into the cliffs, the tall, needle-like obelisks, their tips once sheathed in gold to catch the first light of dawn. For over 3,000 years, longer than almost any civilization the world has ever known, the Egyptians built and worshipped and told these gentle stories, generation after generation, beneath the same warm sun. "3,000 years. It is worth pausing on that quietly as the night deepens. The stories we have been telling tonight were old when the oldest histories were young. Pharaohs looked upon the pyramids as ancient monuments, already 1,000 years old in their own day. And through all those long, long centuries, the sun rose faithfully each morning, and the river flooded faithfully each year, and the people told these same soft tales of Osiris and Isis and the journey of the soul, and found in them the same deep comfort that perhaps you may find in them tonight. Now, the Egyptians did not tell only one story of how the world began, but several in their different great cities, and each is worth a gentle moment tonight. In the city of Heliopolis, they told the tale we have already heard of Atum rising from the waters. But in the ancient city of Memphis, they told that it was Ptah, the great craftsman god, who created all things, conceiving each one first within his heart, and then speaking its name aloud, so that thought and word together brought the whole world quietly into being. And in the city of Hermopolis, they told of 8 ancient gods, the Ogdoad, 4 gentle pairs who embodied the qualities of the first waters, the endlessness, the darkness, the hiddenness, and the deep. And from these 8, it was said, there rose the first mound, and upon it there appeared a great cosmic egg, or in some tellings a beautiful blue lotus flower, which opened slowly upon the still water to reveal, resting within it, the newborn sun, a divine child whose first light drove back the darkness of the endless night. It is a lovely image to rest upon. The young sun, a small and radiant child, cradled within the petals of a lotus rising from the dark water, opening at the very first dawn. And the Egyptians saw this echoed each day, for the blue lotus of the Nile closes at night and sinks beneath the water, and rises and opens again with the morning sun. And so, in the simple opening of a flower upon the river each morning, they saw the whole great story of creation gently retold again and again forever. the life of Egypt turned upon the river, and upon its 3 great seasons, which shaped the whole of the year. First came Akhet, the season of the flooding, when the Nile rose and spread its rich dark waters across the land, and the fields lay beneath the life-giving flood, and the people rested from their farming. Then came Perit, the season of the growing, when the waters drew back, and the crops were planted in the fresh, wet soil, and grew green and tall. And last came Shamu, the season of the harvest, when the golden grain was gathered in, before the river rose once more. And so the whole of Egyptian life moved to this slow and certain threefold rhythm, year after year, as reliable as the turning of the stars, the flood, the growth, the harvest, and then the flood again. It was a gentle and a reassuring rhythm to live within, a world that renewed itself faithfully each year, that could be trusted and counted upon. And the Egyptians felt themselves held within it, carried along by it as a small boat is carried gently and safely upon the patient current of the great river itself. Now let us return to that tale I mentioned a while ago and tell it more fully. The tale of the 2 brothers, Anpu the elder and Bata the younger, who lived and farmed together in peace. Bata was a remarkable young man, hard-working and honest and gifted, who tended the cattle and worked the fields, and the 2 brothers lived contentedly together. But a misunderstanding arose between them through no true fault of Bata's, and the good young man, wrongly suspected, was forced to flee from his home, his heart heavy with the injustice of it. Bata fled far away to a distant valley, and there, in his sorrow, he worked a strange magic. He took his own heart and hid it high in the branches of a great tree for safekeeping, so that his life should be bound up in it. And there he lived alone for a long while, until in time the gods themselves took pity on his loneliness and fashioned for him a companion. But the tale, like so many old tales, wound on through many turns of fortune and misfortune, through loss and danger and transformation. For through a series of strange events, Bata's hidden heart was endangered, and the tree that held it was cut down, and Bata fell as if lifeless. But his faithful elder brother Anpu, who had long since learned the truth of the old misunderstanding and grieved for it, set out to find him. And Anpu searched patiently for years, until at last he found his brother's hidden heart and gently restored it, and so brought Bata back to life once more, and the 2 brothers were reconciled, their old wound healed at last. And the tale wound on still further, for Bata, through the magic of that age, was transformed into many things, into a great bull, and then, when that that farm was lost into 2 tall trees, and at last was reborn once more as a child. And through all these many turnings, the wrong that had been done to him was slowly, surely set right, until at last, the old story says, he became a great and honored king himself, and reigned long and well. It is a strange and dreamlike tale, full of the deep old logic of folk stories, in which patience and innocence are, in the end, always rewarded. There was another famous tale of a prince named Setne, a learned man and a great reader of ancient writings, who heard of a wondrous and dangerous thing, the Book of Thoth, a scroll containing the most powerful magic in all the world, written by the god of wisdom himself. With it, one could enchant the very heavens and the earth, and understand the speech of the birds and the beasts. And this book, it was said, lay hidden in a tomb, deep beneath the ground, guarded by the spirits of the dead who had once possessed it. Setne, driven by his hunger for knowledge, went down into that tomb, and there he found the book, glowing with its own light, and there too he found the ghosts of the family who guarded it. And they warned him, gently and sorrowfully, of the great grief that possessing the book had brought upon them, and begged him not to take it. It is a tale, in part, about the dangers of wanting to know too much, and reaching for power that is not meant for mortal hands, however learned and however well-meaning. And in the end, after many strange adventures and hard lessons, Setne came to understand the wisdom of the warning, and returned the dangerous book to its resting place, and made his peace with the guardian spirits. He returned to the ordinary world a humbler and a wiser man, content at last with the knowledge proper to a mortal life, and no longer reaching for the forbidden magic of the gods. And so the tale, like so many Egyptian tales, ends not in triumph, but in a gentle and hard-won wisdom, and in the quiet restoration of the proper order of things. The Egyptians treasured justice above almost all things, and they told a famous tale of an eloquent peasant, a humble man who was robbed of his goods by a greedy official as he traveled to market. The peasant, though poor, had a remarkable gift for speech, and he came before the high steward to plead for justice, and he pleaded so beautifully, with such moving and well-chosen words, that the steward secretly reported his eloquence to the Pharaoh himself. And the Pharaoh, delighted by the peasant's gift, gave a curious command, that justice should be delayed a little while, only so that the peasant might be encouraged to keep speaking, and his beautiful pleas be written down and enjoyed. And so the peasant made 9 great speeches, each one more moving than the last, all upon the theme of justice, and of Ma'at, the sacred balance and of the duty of the powerful to protect the weak. And in the end, of course, justice was done. The peasant's goods were restored to him, and more besides, and the greedy official was punished. For in the Egyptian world, Ma'at, in the end, must always be restored. Let us return, too, for a gentle moment, to the care of the dead. For there was one more beautiful ritual we have not yet spoken of, the opening of the mouth. Before the mummy was laid at last to rest, the priests would perform this sacred ceremony upon it, gently touching the mouth and the eyes and the ears of the deceased with special instruments. And this, it was believed, magically restored the dead person's senses, so that in the next world they might once again breathe and speak and see and eat and fully live. It was a tender act of love, the gentle waking of the traveler for their new and everlasting life. And within the tomb were placed the Shapti, small carved figures, sometimes dozens or even hundreds of them, whose task was to serve the dead one in the afterlife. For it was believed that in the field of reeds there might still be work to be done, fields to be tended, and so these little figures were enchanted to rise up and do that work on the owner's behalf, whenever they were called upon, so that the blessed dead might rest in perfect ease. Every detail, you see, was thought of and prepared with care. No comfort forgotten, no need unmet for the long life to come. Let us return as well to the long contest of Horus and Set, for there were many episodes to it that the Egyptians loved to tell. There was the time the two gods transformed themselves into great hippopotami and plunged beneath the water to see who could remain there longest. There was a time Set wounded the eye of Horus, and it was healed by the wise god Thoth, and the restored eye of Horus became forever after a symbol of healing and of wholeness. Through trial after trial, cleverness and rightful purpose slowly and surely won out over raw and reckless strength. And in all these tales, the deeper meaning was the same, and it was a meaning close to the Egyptian heart, that order in the end overcomes chaos, that justice in the end overcomes wrongdoing, that the rightful and the good, though they may suffer long, are restored at last. Horus, the rightful heir, gains his throne. Osiris, the murdered king, becomes lord of a gentle eternity. The peasant wins his justice. The wronged brother becomes a king. Again and again, the Egyptians told themselves, gently, that the world, for all its troubles, is ordered toward the good. There came, in the long history of Egypt, one remarkable age when a single pharaoh, whom we call Akhenaten, turned away from the many gods and worshipped only one, the Atum, the shining disk of the sun, whose life-giving rays reached down like gentle hands to bless the whole of the earth. For a brief and radiant time, he built a whole new city to this single god and composed beautiful hymns to the light. It did not last beyond his reign, and the old gods soon returned, but it remains one of the most striking and beautiful moments in all the long story of Egypt. A hymn of praise to the simple, warming light of the sun. And in their daily lives, the Egyptians felt the divine close at hand in the humblest of things, and especially in the animals around them, many of which were sacred to one god or another. The cat was dear to gentle Bastet, the ibis, and the baboon to wise Thoth, the falcon to Horus, the jackal to Anubis, the cow to Hathor, the crocodile to Sobek, the ram to Khnum, and to Ammon. And so the ordinary creatures of the fields and the river and the home were seen as gentle reflections of the gods, and the whole living world was felt to be quietly holy and watched over in every part. So this was the shape of the old Egyptian world, the endless dark waters of Nun, and the first Mound rising, the sun god sailing his golden boat across the sky by day, and through the underworld by night, the gentle Osiris and the faithful Isis, and the sun Horus upon the throne, the great river rising and falling, and the long, hopeful journey of every soul through the shadowed Duat, past the gentle weighing of the heart, and into the sunlit field of reeds at last. It is a world woven through with light and order and a deep and patient hope. So our long journey through the old Egyptian world comes gently to its close. We have watched the first land rise from the dark waters, sailed with the sun through the day and the night, followed a gentle king through death and into a kinder kingdom beyond, and seen the quiet hope with which a whole great people once faced the mystery of eternity. There is nothing more you need to remember tonight, and nowhere else you need to be. The sun has set, and it will rise again, all on its own, while you rest here, safe and warm and still. So let your breathing settle now, slow and soft and even, and let yourself drift, calm and unafraid, down into the deep and gentle rest from which all new mornings in time are born. Sleep now. The old river is flowing on quietly in the dark, as it always has, and as it always will, carrying you gently on toward the dawn.